Okay, teachers, welcome to day 2 of our Panaboard or Active Inspire training. Today we're going to be talking about layers. Now, first of all, let's discuss what are layers. Okay, think about it just a moment. Layers is something that you see in a lot of computer programming or computer programs such as Photoshop and other things that you may be familiar with. But take a moment and turn to your neighbor, discuss what you think layers are and why layers. Okay, these are some of the things I want you to kind of get a grasp on today. Is why do layers in your presentations? Okay, so go ahead and pause the presentation, Jake, and then after you've had a few minutes of talking about layers and understanding what you all know, then we'll continue and I'll go over what I've got. Okay, so working with layers. First of all, layers to me they're like a stack of papers on a desktop. Okay, you have 4 different categories of layers. And I'm going to pin this open. This is called the object browser, and we'll talk about this a bit more as we proceed through today's lesson. As you can see, there's a top layer, middle layer, bottom layer, and background. Notice which layer that is in. Now, if it's kind of confusing, that is in the middle layer. It's not in the bottom layer. So it tells you what each of these things are. Now, as you create things, if you're like, I don't know what those are going to be, you can always rename something. So, for example, the first one that shows up is this picture on the right. Now, this is a picture of the object layer. Notice they look a lot alike. There's some differences, but very, very similar. The only thing that's not there is this image that you see. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to just say object browser. Okay, so when you're at your computer and doing what's called authoring, you just tap on it or click on it, and then I think you have to double click to get started. Now notice that's the pentagon, right? 5 sides, yeah. And so forth. So that's something you can do. You don't have to do that, but if you're going to be like, what is that? Go ahead. Okay. So layers are like stacks of paper on top of a desk. Okay, and you have dividers: the bottom layer, the middle layer, and the top layer. Okay, and what's visible is whatever's on top. Okay, if you have anything on the top layer, for example, if I do some drawing, notice it says pen 1 over here. Okay, that's going to show up on top of everything. I drag it around. Nothing is on top of that. Okay, the only way to change that is to bring it forward, so to speak. One way to do that is to just pull the objects up, so that then I take this and I need to highlight the pen. If you ever have difficulty highlighting something, just go into the object browser. That's one of the fastest ways of doing that. So notice as I drag the pen, it's covered up. Okay, so layers are a great way of determining what is visible to your audience. Okay, and with this, there's a lot of fun tools that you can do that make it possible. One example of this, and we'll talk about how to set up Magic Ink. But one example is it makes the top layer invisible. Okay, that's what Magic Ink does. So that can be pretty fun. One of my favorite tools is this reset the page, but you don't want to do that unless you've saved it. Okay. Now, right here we have a stack of objects, and they're not all going to be the same size. It's like taking an assignment from your students that they have different sizes of papers and stuff like that. Fortunately, you're not going to be picking this up and things aren't going to be falling out because it's digital, it's all there. But you kind of get the idea. If I take this pentagon, I drag it, this one's on top of the triangle and it's on top of the square, so there we go. And then this text is on the bottom of the stack, and so as I drag it, it goes underneath it. Okay. Now, if you're like, oh shoot, it's gone. If I tap there, I can't get it. Well, that's why the object browser is great, because then you just select it there, and it's still not working so good that way. But at least there's a few things you can do. Like, for example, this button on the marquee, that's the move button. So it's a great little handle that lets you pull it. As long as that's there, you're not going to be highlighting or selecting or moving anything else. Okay, so what I've created here on this slide is kind of an idea of how to make something fun. So say you've got something that's informative or something that's kind of fun to get down to. The purpose is to then get rid of it. So I can either delete it, and one of the best ways to delete it when at the board is just drag it down to this wastebasket. Boom, boom. There it goes. You saw this one yesterday. That's the bottom layer, or the bottom of the stack. Okay, so a cute little girl. That's my daughter, by the way, if you didn't know that. And then reset the page. We're good to go for the next class, or the next time you present this. Okay, tools for layers. Now these are just pictures of the buttons that you might see when you're moving or selecting or doing anything with objects. Okay, so just to give you an example, if I touch one of these things, right in this area, right here, that you can see my cursor moving over it. Those are examples of some things you can do with layers. Okay, this one is called grouping. When you have multiple items selected, you can group them and then they act as if they're one. Okay, so we do the select thing where we drag from a blank area of the page, drag it over there, then we group them, and they move as one. Okay, and then notice that one's got an orange hue to it. If you tap it again, it goes away. Another cool tool for layering purposes is this transparency button, which is the orange. It looks like a little orange circle. You just drag that, okay, and notice what's happening to that shape. It's disappearing, reappearing. Even if it disappears, the object's still there, and as long as it's on top and you know where it's at, you're not going to have any issues with it. And you just take that button and drag it. It's not the kind of, it doesn't do anything if you just click on that button. So what you do is you take it, drag it, and then you're good. Okay? So another way of using layers, if you have one object concealing another, and all that you're doing is seeing what's underneath, you've got the transparency slider. You might want to write that down if you even if you aren't going to have any trouble remembering it. It's helpful to write this down. The transparency slider, it's easy to forget about. and so forth. Okay. These pictures right here are not all of the tools, obviously, that you use for layering, but these are your reordering options that we use. These here on the left side of the screen, these are the send to layer, okay? So this top one right here, that's send to bottom layer, okay? This one, send to middle layer, and this one, send to top layer, okay? Okay, so the way to remember this is that on this top one here, see, notice the bottom is darker, so that means send bottom layer. The middle one is darker, send to middle layer, and with the top one, send to top layer. So pretty easy to remember. And in all of these tools where you're rearranging the order or reordering these objects, the darker image is where you're wanting your object to go. So for example, in this picture you see the dark triangle is behind the light square. So that means send backward. Okay? If you're talking in terms of over here on the object browser, sending backward is sending it towards the bottom. Or bring forward is bringing it towards the top. Okay? And so this one is bring forward. Okay? It's not too hard to find the tools here. So there's two ways to get to this menu that you see. What I just did is clicked on that little image that the mouse is hovering over. And then it brings all these things, and reorder is what we're looking for. Okay. Another way to get to these tools is to tap and hold, and the computer makes that funny little noise, but hey, it gets there. Okay, so reorder, and there's actually 7 tools that are in this reordering. Bring to front, bring forward, send to back, send backward, and then notice the difference between bring to front and send to back. The difference between bring to front and to top layer is bring to front brings it to the top of that stack. So for example, watch image 1, that's the one that's highlighted. If I hit bring to front, image 1 goes to the top of the middle layer. Okay, it did not change layers. All right, so just remember that. The difference between bring to front and to top layer is that it doesn't change what layer it's in. Notice the direction that these images go. So on bring to front, you see the square is actually a square, so it's facing you, bring to front. Okay, when they're laying down in the image, they're thinking top, middle, bottom. That's the best way to remember it. Obviously here, there's no reason to differentiate, but there may be places that you see this images, like for example, if you put it in your toolbar and you're like, oh, what was that? Instead of having to hover over it, because that's kind of a pain when you're in front of the board to hover over something, you just, if you can remember what the images look like, that will help you a lot. Okay. So, if you have any questions, please ask. We would be happy to help. Okay. Another thing that I wanted to kind of go over is, well, we'll do that on the next slide. Notice I have something in each layer. I have something on the top layer, something on the middle layer, bottom layer, and background layer. Okay. Now, to make an image that you add to your document a background, there's a couple ways to do that, but one of the easiest ways is with this object browser. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use the transparency slider to make this go away. Okay, so this we just see object browser is the fastest way to change layers. Okay, because all you have to do is, in terms of using a mouse, click and drag, you can do the same thing by tapping the image and moving it around. Okay, notice the little black line. Okay, that black line is telling you where it's going to put it. If it highlights the layer, you're just going to be putting it in that layer wherever it ends up going, which will probably be at the bottom of the stack. The background layer, there's only one, I believe. Nope, looks like you can do two. Anyway, so you get the idea. It doesn't let you choose where to go, but once it's there, you can still move it around. I mean, there's nothing saying that you can't just drag it down, drag it up. Any questions about that? So, as you saw before, one way to make an image that you have on the page, a background, is to just drag it down in the object browser, drag it down to the background layer. Okay. Now, I think I just talked about this about 5 minutes ago. There is a way, because this is in the top layer, you can make this kind of a fun game, like what's underneath the shape. Okay, and you can color the whole thing in, or you can make a little bit of a circle there, take your select tool and move that. Look at that. Isn't that awesome? Okay, and so in preparing for something like this, you can take an image and group it with something like this, and you move the image around, kind of like my magnifying glass that I used in yesterday's presentation. That's what it looks like, basically. And it can be fun, kind of creative way of revealing what's underneath there. It becomes a mystery. What's there? Who wants to drag this around? Great ideas. Okay. Now, I believe I want to make this available to you. My plan is that you already have this. If you don't have this presentation already, it might be a good idea to get it, just so that you can play around with what I've done and try to do these things along with. All right, so I'm going to move to the next slide here. Okay, here is, this is not directly associated with layers, so I'm going to actually get rid of this. But notice, the topic came up of grouping earlier. This object right here is grouped. You can tell that it's grouped because this button right here is orange. Okay, and I just ungrouped it. But I can undo that and then it's grouped again. Okay, so they all move together. Okay, but notice over here in the object browser on the left side here, they all show up as individual images. Okay, so I select just one and it still moves as one, but you at least select it, and you can change the size and do other things like that without affecting the others so much. Okay. Now, back to the topic of endless copy. The terminology in this program is drag copy. I believe Notebook probably calls it endless copy, but this is how you do it. Drag a copy, you just hit that. If you missed that, I mean, it was up there for a little while. Drag a copy, see that there on the bottom. And if you don't want it to drag a copy anymore, yeah. Okay, so this is what it looks like when you drag a copy. These up here are set to drag a copy. So you drag a copy down. Now this one is not going to copy itself. Okay, but this is still up there, and you can pull it down. Okay, this can be a really fun activity if you're counting money, for example. You can have pennies, you have a penny and a nickel and a dime and a quarter, and you just drag them down and make little stacks, and you can count them out. Really fun ideas. Okay, and really the sky's the limit with these. That's what's really awesome about interactive whiteboards, is that you can make it what you want it to be. The interactive whiteboard can be just a whiteboard that you write on, or it can become something that that engages the students and gets them involved and helps them stay interested in learning with hands-on experience. And that's really what we want this to be for them. Okay. Now, as you hover over an item that's like that, notice there's a little plus button there. That's what it means when it's ready to do drag a copy. Okay. Notice though, when I put the cursor over this image, there was a little play button. Okay, this is for interactive content. What I've done is I've put something on here that's playable over this sign, and I've made it hidden. So that way, if you tap on the sign, then it does whatever that interactive thing was. Okay, so that's a really fun way of, like say for example, you have a lion, you can put that sound, and it's from your resource browser. We'll be going over resources with all the browsers tomorrow. But I just want you to understand how cool this can be, and really make it fun for the students. Okay. At this point, however, the things that we've learned so far is how to reorder using the commands that show up in the toolbar. Reorder, using these things. If you don't completely understand how they work, pull up the object browser, play around with it, use these things, and if you ever mess up a slide and you want to start over, just tap on the clear or the reset button. Okay, I mean, obviously that's going to mess things up if you don't have it saved, but you can even undo a reset page, which is awesome. So reset page and undo are your friend. So back to what I was saying, we want you to understand how to reorder things, how to create background images, how to make an item a drag and drop, or drag a copy, I mean, okay? And so these are the basic things that I want you to know. Some of you may have caught on to a lot more than others, I don't want you to compare yourselves to your peers. I want you to think about what you're learning and apply what you can. Okay? Don't worry about applying everything that I'm throwing at you. It can be a lot of information. Okay. But if there's ever, as you review this video, since I'm going to make this available for review, I would suggest that every time you look at it, you pick something new that you can work on. Okay, moving on. These are some other very, very useful tools. They help eliminate some distractions and make it fun for the students at the same time. Okay, so first of all, Spotlight. When you're in author or at the board mode, the only way to find Spotlight, or the best way, is to hit the tools, and it's right here at the bottom, underneath Revealer. So right there. There are 4 different types of spotlights. Okay, the solid spotlights, it covers up a little portion of the screen. Okay, the circular or square spotlight, the top 2 options, it covers everything but that circle or square. So I'll show you circular first. Okay, so here is the spotlight, and what you want to do is you want to drag from right about, well, I guess it doesn't matter where you're dragging from. You can drag from clear over here. Anywhere in the black, drag it around. Okay. To resize it, you do it from the blue. Okay. And then you can interact with things inside the white. Okay. So let's say that you wanted to make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so we'll drag it down. Okay, then you get to see more of it at a time. Okay, so there's that. If it's a really long sound and you don't want to turn it off, there's a way to do it up here at the top. That turns off all sound, all the sound effects. So for example, stops it. Okay. Now, it can be frustrating if you want to turn off the spotlight and you don't know where to look to turn it off. Notice this little square with a little paper-looking thing. That's supposed to be a toolbar or a menu bar. So here you can take a snapshot. Okay. Change the mode or close. Okay. Now if I were to actually hit the close instead of outside of the box, it would close. Okay. So again, very powerful tool. Something very similar is called the Revealer. Now this is like you're using an overhead projector and you've got a list of things or problems that you want to go through, but you don't want them to see everything at once. Boom. Now notice the dotted lines. I don't know if you can see the dotted lines, but you have them going from corner to corner basically. Okay, so notice if I drag from the middle on this side, I try to drag it that way, nothing happens. I try to drag it this way, nothing happens. This way, oh look. Okay, so it's from the bottom, so basically from whatever portion of the screen that you want to reveal, that's what you do. So very useful. So for example, if I were to use this for the rest of the presentation, that's our next thing. If you want to close it down, notice, close Revealer. Notice that that toolbar image is behind the toolbox. The best way to get to that is to just drag this side over and close. Okay. Adding a link to a website or file. There are three basic ways of doing this. You can add a link to a file on your computer. You can add a link to a web page so that you don't have to do any typing. You just tap and it takes you right to it, and then you close that window and it comes right back to this. So there you go. A link to a website. And then the third one is what's called embedding. Okay, so that's where you take a YouTube file and you embed it. I'm sure many of you have had experiences embedding things into places. Perhaps maybe none of you have. But what that does is it makes it so you don't have to leave the presentation to watch the video. You don't have to actually visit YouTube to see the video. Okay? My purpose is not to teach you how to do this specific thing, but if you want to, I will have a tutorial to do this. I know that I've done a tutorial in the past that kind of explains how to embed, but I probably didn't share it with any of you. But I'll make that available to you. So the two that we want to worry about right at this very moment is adding a link to a website or a file. Okay, so what would be the advantage of adding a link to a file? I mean, it's there on your computer. You can find it, open it up, right? Well, think about it. Anytime that you spend time looking for anything, that's going to be more downtime. Time for students to get distracted. Time for their attention to waver. Time to start talking to their friends and this and that. Okay, if you find it, save it into your presentation. It makes it really easy. There's two ways to do it that I find useful. Okay, let's just kind of go into it. Number one, here's our tools. We want these tools up here, okay, because we want insert. Now, if we haven't already talked about this that you're seeing is the same thing as what shows up here at the top. Okay, so insert, link, okay, and there's our three options. So we're going to do a file, okay, and let's say we've got a movie file we want to play. We can do lots of things. Let's take, for example, I don't know, this one. Okay. So if I just hit OK, what the students will see is this. And that's fine. I've even done it this way and then edited the text afterwards. So it's really not a big deal. But another way to do it is to select your text and then hit that third button, I don't even know what to call it, the menu button or whatever, although that's confusing because there's other things called menu, but that button right there. And then you want to insert link to file right there. Okay, then you can go like that, and this looks familiar, but the only difference is text 3 is highlighted and you can't change it. Okay, so that's great. That's if you want it text and you want it specific text and you don't want to have to go and edit it later, but that's not a big deal either. Okay, so I'll show you what it means to insert a link to a file and then editing the text later. So again, same file. I'm going to hit OK, and here's our link. If I tapped that, it would bring that movie right up.
Okay, teachers, I am going to give you a little tutorial.
Okay, and then to edit that, if you're at the board, you tap and hold, or if you're at your computer, you right-click, and then edit text is that third option from the top. Okay, and then you can just highlight all of it and edit that to be whatever you want. Okay, and you'll want it something that you can remember, because that's really part of this is for you. Okay, then when you tap on that.
Okay, teachers, I am going to give you.
So you kind of get the idea, I hope. If you don't, again, I hope that this entire time, rather than waiting until you've forgotten what your questions were, I hope that you've been taking the time to ask Jake to pause it and ask him how to do it. The idea is we want you to get the most out of this presentation. Okay. Now, you can do the same thing with adding a link. Okay, so we're going to do insert link to a website. Okay, now that we're here, a lot of times these links, these website addresses are really complicated. Okay, so you're not going to want to type it in. You're going to want to paste it from somewhere. Obviously, this stuff you're not going to be doing in front of the students. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Safari. You may have had it open already at this point. Then you go to the website that you want to visit. Let's say it's somewhere in Wikipedia. You know, not to say that that's something that you'll use, but let's say we wanted to research apples. You found a really good article on the apple in Wikipedia. Then you go like this, and you can copy. Then you go right back. You can actually close that if you want, and then go right back, and there it is. So to paste it, you can just right click, paste, and then hit OK. All right, so again, it's kind of messy because there's what's called the URL, but you can edit the text like this, and then name it whatever you want, and then when you tap on that, it brings the browser right up in front of it. And just close it and go right back into it. Okay? Really, really simple. Now, I've shown you how to put it in as a text. You can also do images, and I'm just going to walk you through that. I don't want to lose any of you. If you're fine with text, really that's the easiest way to remember what it is if you're prone to forget. But let's say I'll just show you an example of a file, and I'll just do untitled, whatever that is. And then right here in add link as, we can do an image icon, action object, existing object, placeholder. Now the great thing about existing object, that is how you can select anything that's on the page. Okay, so let's say, for example, I hit this and I go, actually I need to redo that again because I think I missed a step. Link, file, untitled, open, existing object. Now in order to do existing object, you have to hit this little dot, dot, dot there on the side. Okay, so this is where you get to look. Let's say we do bird sound. No, you think, okay, well that's already an interactive object. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we're going to place that there, and then we'll go, okay, and then I'll do the bird sound.
Welcome to Introduction to Browsers, a part of our ActivInspire training series. As you can see, over here is...
Okay, so there you go. Really useful tools. The adding a link is probably one of the more, I don't know, you might disagree with me, but probably one of the more complicated portions of this. But we do expect you to learn how to use this, and today's assignment is going to include adding a link to either a file or a web page. Okay, so your lesson or your assignment for today is twofold. Number one, you need to find another lesson from Promethean Planet. Again, this whole week we want you to be exploring Promethean Planet and finding ideas from other teachers that have posted their lessons on Promethean Planet. And it's really awesome, and I've already talked about this. Promethean Planet has a lot of great resources for you. And then we also want you to start actually creating your own things. And this is what we want you to include. Endless copy, or drag a copy. Revealer or spotlight. So incorporate that into your presentation. Background. So we want you to make an image a background. And then we want you to include shapes, images, text. I think that that's pretty obvious that you would have that in a lesson. And then add a link to a web page or file. Okay? Hopefully this was informative. If not, please don't hesitate to ask. If you come away today confused about any of this, or you feel like you could use a little bit more attention to anything in this area, please don't hesitate to let me know. And I'm making these available and other resources available to you, if I haven't already mentioned this, at mrhinton.com/Lincoln. Or even if you just go to mrhinton.com, I have a link to ActivInspire Training or Active Training. I probably left it at ActivInspire Training. And so there you go. Thank you.